más alto que cualquier otro. Nuestro Dios sana, asombroso en poder, nuestro Dios, nuestro Dios. Si Dios es con nosotros, nada podrá pararnos. Si Dios es con nosotros, ¿quién nos podrá vencer? ¿Quién nos podrá vencer? God is the greater, God is the stronger, God is the higher than any other. God is the healer, awesome in power, our God, our God. Our God is the greater, God is the higher than any other. God is the healer, our God, our God. Come on.
Well, good morning, Franklin Community Church. It is Sunday, July the 6th, and I am so glad that you joined us today. I hope you're enjoying your summer break, and I hope you're having a chance, you're getting a chance to go out and do something fun. I'm really excited about what we're going to do this month. And I think the idea of going virtual for the month of July may be controversial to some people, but I think in our situation, being a small church and spending so much energy setting up and tearing down every week, and then during the summer, people out of town, and if somebody's out of town, then that just kind of adds to it. And so just taking a break and give everyone a break from setting up and tearing down and going virtual. But these virtual services are a little bit different than what we've done in the past. We're going to have music, as you already know, but it's basically going to be music and then straight into the conversation I have today. That gives us plenty of room for the conversation, but there's not a lot of other things going on around that. And so it's almost going to be more like a podcast, really, than a service. And what I have done is I have already pre-recorded some conversations with four friends of mine, four friends who have influenced how I do ministry, and as a result have influenced our church. Some of them you may know, but some of them you may not know. And it's just me every week, me and a friend. We're having a conversation about different things, and kind of gives you an insight maybe into some of my thought processes maybe. But we're just having a conversation. We're talking about different issues. And then, of course, I think each person challenges us with their faith, and they challenge us to take a deeper walk with Jesus. Now, today's video, when we get to it after a song, is a little bit different, and I don't know what happened. I didn't hit the right button or something. And so instead of it being a split screen, whereas I'm talking to Doug Pagitt, who is our person today, it's either going to be him on the screen or me. I didn't hit the button where it's split screen so we could both be on the screen at the same time. I think it'll be okay, but just to give you a heads up, I don't know what went wrong. I don't know what I didn't do, but that's just what happened. And then the other three conversations, both me and the person I'm talking to, will be on the screen at the same time. But I am so glad that you're here, and I just pray that this is going to be beneficial to you, and that you will learn something, but also you'll be challenged in your walk with Jesus.
adoro por lo que hiciste. Oh, 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 quien rompe el poder del pecado, su amor es fuerte y poderoso, el Rey de gloria, el Rey de majestad. Conmueve al mundo con su justicia y nos asombra con maravilla. El Rey de gloria, el Rey de majestad. Gracias sublime, perfecto es su amor. Tomaste mi lugar, cargaste tu vida diste allí. Y ahora libre soy. Oh, Jesús, te adoro por lo que hiciste en mí. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who covered it. Jesús, te adoro por lo que hiciste. Oh, 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 oh,
All right, well, welcome everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the service so far, and I'm really looking forward to talking to Doug Pagitt today. He is the man of the hour, or at least the next 30 minutes, anyway. And just to kind of remind everybody again, what we're doing is during the month of July, not having a physical church service, going virtual. And I had this idea that, you know what, I want to just call up some friends of mine who have influenced me, and just kind of interview them and talk about ministry. They've kind of influenced how I've done ministry. And when I had this idea, really one of the first persons that came to mind was Doug. And I've had the wonderful privilege, probably the last, I don't know, I think it was before COVID, you came for one of our March for Mercies.
Yeah.
And I was actually able to meet you. So that's been, 6 or 7 years ago. But I've known of Doug for a very long time. He just didn't know. I'm afraid some of these guys I talk to, they're going to think I've been stalking them all these years.
That's right.
But my relationship with Doug as a friend has gone back about 7 years, and really the last 3 years. We spent some time in England together where I felt like, man, this is really a friend, somebody I can count on. And so I have really appreciated that and that friendship since then. But just to give everybody some background, Doug was first a youth minister, right, at one of the larger mega churches in the country.
Yeah, I was.
Up in Minnesota, Minneapolis. And also, before I forget about it, Doug's taller than me. So, very few, I run into very few people
That's
like
right.
that. I'm 6'4", and you're, what are you, Doug?
I'm 6'7".
Yes. So he's He's taller than me, and he's also younger than me, which really hurt my feelings when I found that out. Because usually, when you look up to people, you look up to people who are older than you.
That's
And I
right.
think just by a couple of years, I'll be 60 in November. And
Oh yeah, I'll be 59 in July. I
okay,
don't know when
so
this is playing because we're pretending in the
well, your
future here.
birthday's
Yeah.
July 5th, you told me. So
So I might be 59
maybe
by the
we'll
time people
intentionally
hear
play
this.
it around your birthday for that. So a year different from that, but a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But
Yeah.
probably, I don't know, it'd have been the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a group of authors and ministers and pastors who started talking about a different way to do church, and it became known as the emergent church. And I followed that. I read all I could. So I read some of Doug's stuff, mainly in periodicals, not necessarily books, but in different periodicals. And then I actually, Doug, I did a 2 or 3 part series in the denomination that I was a part of.
Hmm.
I did a 2 or 3 part series in the denominational magazine about the emergent church, and I was pro, and then there was somebody who was writing anti, and so
Oh,
this went on for 3 months. I wish I could find those articles, but they're
wouldn't that
long
be
since.
fun? See if
Yeah,
you still
and
feel the same way, and if they
well,
do.
and you
Yeah.
know what? To be honest, all the things I got in trouble for in my denomination, that really wasn't one of them. There was really a lot of positive feedback
Yeah.
on that, and it may have been because there was a give and take, and not just one person spouting off. But then, and this would have been around, Doug. This would have been around 2000, sometime between 2004 2006, somewhere in that time frame. I went to a preaching conference in Texas. I
Hmm.
don't know if you remember that at all. And it was a small group, I think only 300 or so people, all pastors. And to be honest, it's one of the best conferences I attended. But you were one of the speakers and you spoke a couple times. I think it was on imaginative preaching or using your imagination or something like that.
Hmm.
And I got to meet you then. I know you don't remember that, but I got to meet you then. And then, of course, I'm jumping around a little bit, but then you left the youth ministry and started your own church, and the name of that church was Solomon's Porch. And during a day and time when people are trying to be cool with their church names, I mean, I'm not very creative. My church is Franklin Community Church. I couldn't think of a really cool name outside of that. But of all those cool names out there, for some reason, Solomon's Porch, I thought just that name itself, at least what it envisioned to me,
Yeah.
talking about Solomon, the wisest man to ever live, but yet you're just sitting around a porch in fellowship, talking and trying to seek after wisdom together. I don't know if that's what it meant, but that's kind of how I interpreted it. And then I heard somewhere that you got rid of the pews and just brought in a bunch of couches. Is that true?
Yeah. It is. Yeah. Yeah. We not only couches, kind of household furniture overall,
Yeah.
but we also met in the round. So
Yeah. But at one point, how many people at one point?
there would have been, I don't know, maybe the room would fit maybe 250 people at a
Yeah.
time, and we'd run a couple of meetings, but neither of
Yeah.
them would be very full. They wouldn't be full
Yeah.
to the brim, but there'd be, I don't know, 150 people in the room, something like
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
at one time when as a church years ago, we were talking about actually building and doing something like that. I had envisioned and had an architect sketch out different phases of an auditorium. And the final auditorium would seat 700 or 800 people, but it would be in the round
Yeah.
and have tables. And
That's
that
it.
really came from
Yeah.
you. And even today, now as a church, we meet in a gym at a school, but we sit around tables.
Yeah.
And some of that really, came from you. Even though I didn't know you, never been there, but just what I read about what was going on there, that influence is like, man, this is really a good idea. Trying to do something different and get away from the tradition that
Yeah.
we.
I'll just say, Kevin, like just a shift, like moving your regular Christian practice of being in community from face to back of head to face,
Yeah,
just that change, it's really significant,
yeah,
when instead of dozens or hundreds of people looking at the face of one person, when you're able to look at each other's faces and feel that you're in it together, it really does start to shape you differently. So we weren't just doing, like you all, we're not just doing it to be, I don't know, trendy or hip or cool. We were actually trying to change the literal focus that people had, right? When they
yeah,
were gathered together. Like sometimes we'd all face the same direction, But for the most part, we wanted to face different directions, but face each other. If you take just that as a spiritual practice, right? Like we can be facing different directions. We can even be moving in different directions. But if we're facing each other for some brief period of time, it really reorients what a person thinks about themselves and their spirituality and where they find themselves in the world. Because, I mean, at least the kind of Christianity I was welcomed into, I didn't grow up in religion or Christianity. I was a late teenager before I got into it. I mean, the idea of it was that you would see the face of God. And so if one is supposed to see the face of God, why do you stare at the back of people's heads in church meetings? Like, I don't know. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I still struggle with it. I go to a church now where, we sit in rows and it feels more like a bus depot than it does a church to me. But everybody else thinks it feels like a church, which is kind of the shame, frankly.
Well, I can relate to that. And we do have a little thing on all of our tables that explains why we sit around a table. And it is community, trying to build community, and a sense that we're all in this together. We have coffee. We usually have breakfast of some sort there. And what's really funny is before COVID, and our church is very informal. I mean, we follow a liturgy, but it's very informal. But before COVID, we do communion every week, and part of our liturgy was everybody would get up and come to the front. And we'd have a common bread, break the bread, dip into the cup, and serve yourself. Then after COVID, we had to start getting the little bitty pre-prepared things that are packaged, so you wouldn't have the bread of all that. And I really kind of missed that. But I tell people at our church, it was quite common. People would come forward, take communion. We had little groups that would pray for you if you needed to pray. And then on their way back to the table, they go get something to eat, another cup of coffee, and go sit down for the message part of the worship experience. And some people struggle with that, that was being disrespectful. And I'm like, no, that's the communion came out of a common meal, right? He's like, no, this is not the way it is. And it really has changed. And I'm like you, if I go to another church and have to sit in a pew, I'm like, this is really odd.
It's a strange way to posture yourself.
I don't have anywhere to put my Bible.
That's funny. That's funny. I got stuff in my hands. Where am I going to put all this?
Yeah, what am I going to do?
Our communion used to be based around the house party model, and we would use that beginning of that parable of Jesus where he said the kingdom of God is like a man that had a party at his house. So we would put communion all around the room, 10 or 12 different places with a loaf of bread and a bottle of wine and grape juice, and for people that wanted it that way. And then people would get up and serve each other and mill about. So there wasn't one line, there wasn't one group of people who gave to the other. Everyone broke it and gave it to one another. And man, some people like me and others, lots of people loved it. It sort of opened it up and turned it in to something communal and collective. Frankly, a lot more like the breakfast Jesus invites the disciples to after the resurrection, than sort of just the Passover meal. But even the Passover meal, which is what communion comes from, the Lord's Supper, that's where Jesus takes the bread and breaks it and gives it to all of them, and they all share it. Like that was a long flowing meal. It wasn't distribution of a nibble. Like you didn't get one bite.
A stale nibble at that.
And one sip, right? So look, and Christians do a lot of different things with communion. But people would get really bothered, because they thought that the best way to be honoring of God was to be solemn. And there are times, where solemnity is an important thing. But you also don't have to have that be the time where you're solemn. That can be the time that you celebrate,
I really like
sing a somber song and then have a celebratory communion instead of the other way around.
I really got to where I liked movement in the service, where people are getting up and there's some chatter and things like that. I mean, I think it becomes more of a community feel at that point.
We used to say, because a room would get so loud, right? You'd have 100, 150 people talking and a little music playing, and it sounded like a big social hall. And then someone would kind of interrupt and lead us in a collective saying together. And once it went from all the voices to one voice, we regularly noticed, and we said it kind of feels like someone puts a break on Pentecost. which, if you know that story, that's when
Yeah.
all the people spoke in all the languages and there was all the talk going on at one time. And we have a whole Christian holiday celebration around that called the Day of Pentecost.
Yeah.
In fact, Pentecostals get their name from that.
That's right.
And so, like, the idea that the many are speaking, there's nothing more fitting for communion in my heart than all of us getting to say something, as opposed to just some people getting to say something. And that's
Yeah,
the
and
kind
that,
of stuff we were up to in the emerging church. We were trying
yeah.
to figure out, like, are there other ways, something else emerging or happening that could allow Christian spirituality to come to life and be good and useful and beneficial to people, recognizing, of course, people are different. And what some people really prefer, other people can hardly handle.
Yeah,
And
that really is.
that's just how life is. But your standard church, the way your typical church runs, there's a lot of those options for people.
Yeah.
In fact, you could pick that same style of church and then get pretty much any sermon content you want out of it. You have that variety in every color. But the things that you all are doing and the things we were up to, I'll just say to your community, they're few and far between. And if you're in it now, treasure it, because it's not always going to be as available to you and to others as you might feel like it is right now.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And then, of course, Solomon's church Solomon's porch came to an end. And I think, again, from a
Yeah.
distance, you handled that with just tremendous grace and integrity. And my church, I was pastor here for a while, and then I moved to Arkansas to pastor a church, and then I came back. But during that time, this church thought about closing, and I really thought that's what they asked me to come help them close the church, and that's really what I was intending to do. But then I felt like God said, "No, go back and do something different," which is where all this came from.
Great.
But one of the things I learned about that is that every church has a life cycle, and
Yeah.
where you're born, you grow, you mature, hopefully you reproduce, and then you age, and then you die. That's just the way it is. I mean, none of the 7 churches in Revelation still exist.
Right.
I mean, the church exists, but not those. The individual aspect of a church, they're going to die, and there's something beautiful in that.
Yeah.
And there's something
Yep.
healthy in that, and then to see you kind of take that approach, that I commend you even on that, because we were right at the brink of having to do the same thing, and who knows what will happen in the future. There may come that time when we realize that our unique expression of faith had its purpose and has done a lot of good.
Yep.
But it may be time to do something else, so to speak. And I just think all of that is just wonderful. So from a distance, Doug, I have admired what you've been doing, and you didn't know that there was some guy
Well,
down
thanks.
south who was just watching and listening, and so when I got to meet you, to me it was a really big deal. Man, I get to meet Doug Pagitt, and then got to march with you and start spending some time with you. Then it was like, this is, I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that God brought you into my life, and
Well, thanks,
and
friend.
again, a lot of ways that we do things, I can trace back to this guy up north.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
And look, I think that's testament to a lot of things. One, that you and others, were, and I hope to be this way too. We're looking for new ways, and we're open to following in some new paths. And so people who are pursuing that, whether it's in something as formal as what you do in churches and trying to influence other church organizations or spirituality or Christianity in America, or if you're doing it in your own life, if you're doing it in your neighborhood, if you're trying to do it in your politics, or you're trying to do it in your spirituality or your friendships, it really matters what people do. We human beings, we follow each other and we learn from each other, and we replicate each other, and we try not to be like maybe we used to be, or like we grew up, and then we want to be like something else. And we really do need each other. It's kind of the heartbeat of reality. And Kevin, I've felt the same for you. Your the work that you do over at Riverbend, it's remarkable, and it has taught me so much. And your way, and the pain that you and your wife and your daughter have gone through, and the loss of your son in the last few years, being close to you and watching that happen has been really helpful to me to see how someone can do it. And I mean, you've experienced something that so many of us have just feared what happened. I don't know what would happen to me if that happened. So I've watched you in your life, and that's what we hope for, right?
That's it.
In life and community, is that we would share and benefit from one another.
Yeah.
It starts sounding like all that Jesus-y talk, that if there's one thing that you would love one another, I think this is what you're describing, right? That we find the path with each
Find
other.
the path. And it's a whole lot better than going to a conference and listening to somebody tell you if you do these 5 things, your church will go from 100 to 1,000.
Yeah, yeah. And that can happen. And I've been in those churches and I've watched those things
Yeah.
happen, and I have friends that are in churches and that's happening to them right now. And I just say to them, like, well, I'm just so sorry for you. Like, I know this is the burden you have to carry. And now
Yeah,
you're
because you've experienced both. I mean,
Yes,
I've been in small and medium-sized churches my whole life, really, and dreamt of being a megachurch pastor. But I'm very, very thankful God did not answer that prayer. I have a lot of friends who are there, and some of the things I see them go through, I'm like, God, thank you for saving me.
Yeah, it's a different
from
way
that.
to live and a different thing to manage.
Yeah.
We have some friends that live up the street and have 7 children, and so there's 9 of them. And so, like, when they just try to go out, it's a whole other deal, And good for them, right? It's that's their path. We only had 4 children, and we could manage 6 inside one vehicle, and made it.
That's it. That's it. You don't need more kids than you have space in the vehicle.
That's funny. Yeah, they have these 2 big vans. Fabulous.
Well, let's change gears a little bit, because another thing that you did, and at this point I knew you, but one thing that I really appreciated was after Trump won his first term, you did a series of podcasts where you talked to evangelical pastors who voted for Trump, just trying to figure out, how did you do that? What was your thinking? And I really appreciated that. I found it incredibly aggravating to hear some of the things they said, but at the same time found it helpful to kind of walk through that. And I appreciated that. And you can speak to that if you want to, but I was using that kind of as a segue to move into, now that you're not pastoring anymore. With that, then you started this organization called Common Good, and where this last election you traveled the country, just talking about moral voting, for lack of a better way to put it. But anyway, you explained that, what got you in now to the political side of things, the common good, and just trying to figure out how we combat some of the things we're facing in our country, like Christian nationalism and other things. So.
Yeah, I've recognized in my time in Christianity, as I mentioned, I got into this in 1983 as a 16, 17-year-old. And it became clear to me then that, look, Christianity is a national religion that, has somewhere at different times in our history, 70 or 80% of the population of the country find themselves connected to the Christian story. And so we're not a nation that is Christian, because nations aren't Christians. It's like having a Christian car or a Christian club. Like you have people can be Christian and then can do things with it. But Christianity has been a force in America and a force in our politics. And I recognized that and wanted to work when I was starting churches and other things, because I wanted Christianity to be better for the world than what I saw. I saw Christianity becoming increasingly sectarian and increasingly separatist and mean in some ways that didn't match the story that I heard and sort of my best experiences with Christianity. And through the 1990s into the 2000s, just watching it just exclude people for all kinds of reasons that didn't make a lot of sense and felt like throwback kind of Christianity. So all that emerging church stuff and all that church life was not only to try to make churches better, but hopefully that then Christianity could have an impact on the world that would be a benefit and blessing to all of the world. Now, I don't want the government being my religion. And when I say Christian nationalism, what I mean is I don't think that the government should derive its authority from Christianity or give special privilege to Christianity or give authority to Christianity, that then means that the government's role is to be Christian. And I think it's the job of faithful Christians to be Christians and not ask the government to do your work for you. And Christian nationalists often confuse what it means for people to be Christians versus their government to be Christian. But at the same time, we do want people who are Christian to live Christianly. And I want my Jewish friends to live out their Jewish faith. And I want my Taoist friends to live as Taoists in the world. And I want all of us to contribute that together in a pluralistic society, not giving benefit, governmental benefit, societal benefit more to one group than to the other, but equal to all of us. And I want my Christianity to be useful. And when I saw the number of religious people who said yes to Donald Trump, explicitly to give him the power to do the things that he said he was going to do in 2015 and 2016, with the cruelty that he expressed toward immigrants, with the way that he spoke about people whose bodies function differently, with the way that he bragged about sexually assaulting women and saying he'd get away with it because he was famous, with the long litany of things that he did before he was ever president, to watch the religious community gather around him and say yes to him so that they could have power, especially the evangelical community, which is a group that I consider my spiritual home. I said, well, this is an area that we need to do some work in. And so we started Vote Common Good to offer to people who felt the way we did, that they didn't want to keep going down that road. And a lot of those people were historic Republican voters. Because, a lot of people just end up being a Republican because they made a commitment to their religion, or they ended up going to some church, or they were raised in a family of faith. And next thing you know, just being a Republican was like ordering, a side of fries at Wendy's. It just came in the package deal. And they didn't like it anymore. And they didn't want to have the fries when they went to Wendy's. They still wanted to go to Wendy's. They didn't know that you could order the meal and ask for a little side salad, which you can. But none of us do because we actually like the fries. So that's a whole other problem. But we knew there were a lot of people who just felt like, I don't want to give up my following of Jesus, but I don't want to follow Trump and MAGAism. So we started an organization that invited those people to do precisely that. And it was actually in Tennessee where the idea really struck me most closely. It was 2016. It was just before the election. And I was talking to a pastor and a guy who attended his church. And there was a particular thing we were working on that, and we're just kind of talking. And I happened to mention, I'm really excited to vote for Hillary Clinton. And the pastor sort of looked at me inquisitively. And the other fellow who was at his leader in his church said, I have never met an evangelical, let alone an evangelical pastor, who's going to vote for a Democrat. And I first thought, yes, you have. They just didn't tell you the truth. Of course you have. Maybe they didn't tell you. And then I thought, that's more common than what a lot of us might experience. Yeah. He just literally didn't know. And then we had a long political conversation that did what political conversations do with strangers, tended not to go anywhere. But it kind of reminded both of us that there are versions of people who hold our faith. So we want to be very public and offer to people, not being a Republican or being a Democrat, but the common good could be your voting criteria. So that's why we call it Vote Common Good. And look, I say to people all the time, if you voting for Donald Trump feels to you like you're doing good, keep going. But if you're pretty sure this doesn't feel so good, and you're having to make a lot of rationales, and you're doing the lesser of two evils argument and all the rest of that, you have another option. And there's other things you can do and other choices that you can make. So we started this group. We travel the country, as you said. We do all kinds of things. We do all kinds of activities and stunts and walks and cross-country bike rides and marches and trainings and candidate events and bus tours. And we're a very small but active group that does all kinds of things around the country. Fundamentally trying to invite the religious community to think in their vote on Tuesday the way they talk on Sundays. And to tell you the truth, too many of us feel like we can proclaim one set of realities on a Sunday in November, and then vote differently on that Tuesday in November. And we're trying to help people find some solace. Now, look, if people aren't bothered by their voting criteria, if they feel like they got it and all the rest of that, we don't have time to run around and disturb the undisturbed. We're trying to give a little bit of hope to the very disturbed and what they can do. And that we know exists in an awful lot of people. And so we're trying to be in this space. So we organize to invite people to, maybe they consider voting for a Democrat for the first time.
Yeah.
Or maybe they consider not voting for the Republican for the first time, or splitting their ticket, or I don't know, doing something else, or writing themselves in, or I don't know, vote for Jesus. I don't know what you're going to do. We just tell them, you don't have to give your faith and your vote to that guy. You can if you want to, of course. I mean, that's what human agency is about.
Yeah.
But you don't have to, and you can still be Christian. And there are pastors and people of faith that feels like your faith that do that differently. And so I really see that as an act of spiritual, like, discipleship, that we can spend some time and then ask people to think about what they think the United States of America should be about. Because if you're Christian in America, your Christianity does have a context.
Yeah.
We're not Christians in first century Jerusalem.
Yeah.
We're Christians in 21st century America. So this is where we need to put our feet on the ground and make decisions about how we're going to live and how we're going to act and what we're going to do.
Yeah, I was at a conference a few years back, and a person said, you have to ask yourself, are you a Christian living in America, or are you an American Christian? And to think that through and the implications of that answer, no, we should be Christians living in America, but not kind of an American Christian, because our view of Christianity in the United States is narrow compared to the rest of the world. And recognizing that our brothers and sisters around the world have a different view of what it means to follow Christ, what it means to take up your cross daily, what it means to serve your neighbor.
That's right.
All of that, and we can learn from them instead of thinking that we have all the answers. And so so vote common good's not over with then, right? You didn't shut it down after the election.
I wish we had.
There's still a lot of work to do, brother. Don't shut it down.
It's been years of loss, my friend. Yeah. Look, we don't do this work because we win. We do this work because we think it's important. And
expand on that just a little bit, because I was going to ask you that. All this work went in, and of course, 2024 happened the way it happened. How do you keep going? All this work, but yet, man, there's still more work to be done. And like you said, it wasn't about winning, it was about something else.
Yeah, look, we've known that this was generational work. And we think we're in a predicament, and we think predicaments are different than problems. Problems tend to have pretty straightforward solutions. Predicaments, they require multiple responses, because every solution you make creates some other struggle somewhere in a predicament. So that's what America is. America is a predicament, and we need many responses. And our current political environment has caused so many of us to feel like we've broken our families. We feel like we've broken our friendships and our relationships. If you're like me, maybe you haven't spoken to your neighbor since 2016. Or you have family members you can't talk about things with, or some people in their own marriages, they can barely figure out how to talk about any of these things. And that's not good, and it's not healthy, and it's not normal, and it hasn't always been this way, and it won't always be this way. So our work, like all difficult predicament-based work, you do it because it's the contribution you can make. If you do it simply because you already know the outcome, then you just have a problem that you're solving. And that's a great thing. When we had a toilet that stopped flushing properly and just kept running, and I just took the little flapper off. I went to my hardware store. I walked in with it, and the guy said, "Oh, I know what that is. You want a new one of those?" I said, "I do." He said, "Here's the one, the new model that fits into that toilet that one fits into." I came in, clicked it in, flushed it, and it worked great. That's a good day, right? I'm glad somebody makes the toilet flapper replacement, and they're just out there solving problems. That's not what we're doing in politics and faith in America. If you're trying to live Christianly in any particular way where you love your neighbor and you figure out how you self-sacrifice without sacrificing yourself, and you figure out how to put others before yourself while also loving God and yourself and others, if you're figuring all that out, that's really complicated. And we need as many friends and as many partners as we can. And if you're a person for whom your political life feels it's in conflict with your faith life, you need some partners and some fellow journeyers and some people that are going to be your friend in the middle of all that. And that's what we think we're doing, trying to help people who live in that space and they really feel trapped and they really feel caught, to know that there are some other options that they have. And look, I wish it wasn't necessary. There's still a lot of other things in how Christianity could be good for the world I'd like to spend some time working on, and a couple of guitar riffs I'd like to spend some time with. But, there's also this, and it seems like it matters. And I want to spend some of my time talking about politics, partly because I care a lot about politics. Not everybody does. And I know that very well. When you're a guy that works for a group called Vote Common Good, and then you say, I actually work with religious voters in politics, you're like, the two topics people don't want to talk about at a party,
right.
Just a barrel of fun. Glad to have you around, man. So I love it, though. I think it's, I get into that stuff, and I actually think the way we govern ourselves has serious implications on how humans thrive. And I think Christians are first and foremost called to be sure that we're helping to nurture human thriving.
Yeah.
So for me, it really, really matters. There's whole other segments about life and society and that I don't spend any time worrying about and working on. This is the area that I spend time working on. And I cheer on other people for caring for the rest of life and society, and I benefit from their work. And I know a bunch of people don't care about politics, and they are glad I do it, and groups like ours do it, and they'll benefit from that. So in some ways, it feels like we're workers in the field together.
Yeah.
And
I appreciate what you do, and I want you to keep doing it, because again, there's a lot of work to do. But I agree with you. I mean, Christ has called us to show people how to live, and there's another way to live than what we're experiencing. There's another way to approach life, and it's a way that is better, maybe not easier, but it's better.
Yeah.
And the human flourishing is what is what we're called to do, to help people thrive and to be the best people they can be. And so the idea of just vote common good says a lot, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. In 2018, when we started the organization, I was still pastoring at the time, and I was also writing books. I've written a whole bunch of books, and I read them in Christian spirituality, and I wrote a book called Outdoing Jesus that came out in 2018. Some people in your group might find some interest in the content of it. And it bases on Jesus' statement from the Gospel of John, where Jesus says, those who believe in me will do the works I'm doing and do even greater works than these. And from my earliest days in Christianity, I've really been fascinated by that notion that Jesus says, those who follow me will do greater works than these that I've done. Like, that is saying something, right? For a lot of people, they think about Jesus as simply the miraculous exception rather than the magnificent rule for life. And I think we should follow Jesus as the magnificent rule, and we should live in that way. And then we do, and we outdo Jesus, because that's what Jesus suggests that we do. So I wrote this whole book about how the Gospel of John is actually a retelling of the Genesis narrative. And in the Gospel of John, the works he's referring to are actually 7 of them. Very specifically, the first 3 are even numbered in the gospel tongue. There's only 7 miraculous signs in the Gospel of John, and it actually parallels the 7 days of creation from Genesis. So some people know Genesis opens with, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And Gospel of John opens with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and has a prologue and poetry just like Genesis, and then introduces a new Adam into the story, which is Jesus, and then 7 days of recreation. What will the kingdom of God under Jesus look like? So it's this recreation narrative of these seven days. And that's when Jesus then at the end of that says, and all these 7 miraculous signs that we've done, these things people will do and will outdo these. So I think they become archetypes for how people are supposed to pursue human flourishing, right? What does it look like? Sort of like be fruitful and multiply in the book of Genesis. What ought we do? So then you have these 7 miraculous signs that become the pathway for human flourishing. So I read the Gospels of Jesus as being connected to not only a past set of experiences, but really to a future set. That's how Jesus speaks about it. And then we fit in the story as those who are doing and outdoing the works of Jesus in the world that we find ourselves in. And it's not bound to one place in the world, but it's to Jerusalem and Samaria and to the very ends of the earth. And so this becomes a big flowing narrative of how we can actually pattern ourselves in some ways of human flourishing. So when I'm kicking around doing my stuff, I'm like, what we're doing right now, this actually is what Christianity ought to lead us to. And there's a lot of people who think, yeah, but isn't pastoring sort of like the highest role that you can do for Christian ministry? And yeah, for some people it is, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, well, that's really good. I will still probably be preaching through the Gospel of John by the time I show this to
Oh,
people. And so I've had 21 sermons on the Gospel of John so far, and you just summarize it all. So maybe I'll just quit preaching from the Gospel of John.
yeah, it's all in a book. You can pick it up over an
Yeah, I'll pick it up
Amazon.
in the book, but you just encapsulated it in
Buddy.
a few sentences, and it's taken me 21 weeks and
Well,
counting to kind of get there. But yeah, but anyway, thank you again for joining us. And I don't know, if you got just one final word for us, and word of encouragement, and then if you wouldn't mind, just give us your final word, and then just
yeah,
pray for us if
sure.
you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of ways you can sort of sum up shorthand for the kind of spirituality that comes from the Jewish and Christian texts and communities. Some people might know the book of Micah and the prophet in the book of Micah. And one particular phrase that's super famous in the Christian world, at least, is from the 6th chapter in verse 8. What does the Lord require of you but to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with God? That's in contrast to what the prophet is saying that the sacrificial temple system wants. Sacrificial temple system wants a continuous flow of blood to appease a blood god. And the prophet Micah says that God doesn't want your blood. God wants kindness and goodness and justice and mercy and humility. And I don't think that's just religious narrative. I think anywhere we can find those things, we ought to find them. Then you have the Apostle Paul that goes on and extrapolates it a bit more, that we bear with each other, that we carry each other's burdens, that we're sensitive and kind, and we go slow with those who need to go slow, and we go fast with those who need to go fast. Like, there's some contrasts in the spirituality of the traditions that we hold to that are better for us than the way we tend to live with each other. And not just in this particular administration, even though I find it to be particularly opposite of many of those things, but in so many other areas of our lives. And we put a burden on ourselves. We put a pressure system on ourselves that almost starts to feel like some sacrificial system that needs a little metaphorical or literal blood to somehow appease some angry God somewhere. And we don't. There is no angry God to appease. There is a God calling us home and asking us to stop shedding one another's blood. I mean, the thing that Easter, we're right in the fringe of Easter right now from when we're recording this, before we hit 4th of July. As I heard standing at a rally with you for the first time, I heard someone say, the resurrection of Jesus is the condemnation of the death penalty.
Yeah.
It is God's greatest no to executions and letting blood flow to satisfy justice or something. And that is just true across the whole world, whether we're doing it literally, metaphorically, all the sacrificial system people are pushing themselves into. So much give up, and if we work hard, and if I strain, all those things, it just wears you out. And then finally you get to justice and grace and mercy and those kinds of things. So that's sort of my last thought.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. Pray for us if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'm going to think of the prayer of Jesus.
All right.
The most famous one is probably the Lord's Prayer. But that's not the one I'm going to use.
Okay.
I'm going to use the other one where Jesus says, Father, as I am in you and you are in me, and we are one, may these with me also be one. May they love one another.
Amen.
And I just think love one another is the greatest prayer we can pray. I like that notion, Jesus saying, I'm in the Father and the Father's in me and I am in you and you're, this whole in and out, up and down, sort of just finding every poetic way to say we're all in this thing together. God, humanity, me, you, Jesus, people around these tables. And our prayer and our call is that we would love one another. And he wouldn't have made it a prayer himself on behalf of his disciples if it was just going to come without some focus and some attention. So I think that can be our prayer, that we would love one another.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Libre soy, Él me rescató, su gracia en mí. Aun siendo yo pecador, Él murió por mí. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed.
Once again, thank you for joining us this morning. I hope you enjoyed the conversation between Doug and myself. And Doug, I want you to know how much I love you and how much I appreciate you coming and sharing with us today. And what you had to say is so encouraging, and I just enjoyed the conversation so much. A couple things about Doug, at least how to stay in touch with him or to learn more about him is one, go to the website of his nonprofit, Vote Common Good, and it's votecommongood.com. And you'll find a lot of good information on there. And that'll kind of let you know a little bit more about what he does. And then also there are a couple podcasts that he does. One he did a few years back, and it's not updated anymore, but it's a really good series on confronting Christian nationalism. So anywhere you listen to podcasts, if you type in that, Doug Pagitt, Confronting Christian Nationalism, it should come up. And then another podcast that's done more regularly is the Vote Common Good podcast. And so you could Google that as well, Vote Common Good podcast, or search it wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I think you would enjoy both of those podcasts and learning more about the work that Doug does. Also, don't forget that Saturday, July 26th at our community center is our annual back to school Nike tennis shoe giveaway. And so we'll have hamburgers and hot dogs, and it usually starts around 10 or 11 o'clock. You can get a hold of Samantha and Shepherd, and she'll tell you more about that. But that's always a big event, and it'll be here before you know it now, just a few weeks away. So Saturday, July 26th, our Nike back to school tennis shoe giveaway at our community center. Have a good week.